Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
You landed at Muscle Mountain.
We did, man. It's it's kind of a wild morning. Honestly, I started following you. A couple of my friends recommended some of the things. I was getting into this. I don't know if you want to call it like a health kick or this kind of journey that I've recently been on, and I kind of got turned on to your videos with sauna, and I had kind of I was never really big sauna connoisseur. Hadn't done much of it. There was a dry sauna at the gym, and I'm sitting in there, and I think it's like 184, and I reached out through one of your comments. I was like, hey, what are the durations? And it was like instantaneously you responded back. I'm like, hey, if you're doing 40 minutes at 184, 2 sessions, that's amazing. And we're doing this. And it was kind of one of those things like I think from an outsider's perspective, kind of looking in on some people in the industry, such as yourself, it's like we almost like hold some of you guys like way, way, way high up, and you'd never think you're going to get a response. And when you responded, it like drew me so much further into your page. It was like, then I started seeing kind of like, the things you would post. And, one of the big things that kind of stuck out to me was like recently you had posted a picture. I don't know if you just had a birthday, but it was like 26 versus 43. And I mean, obviously everybody can see the physical transformation. And it just got me thinking. I was, you only ever get to see like a version of you online. Right. And sometimes you're more open, I think, than some other, influencers or people in the health and fitness industry. And it was like, man, I want to know who Eric is like behind the scenes, And so, the biggest deal for me, and I was telling you kind of off camera, is that a big fear of mine with this podcast is like asking people to come on and be a guest, which is odd because, we've done almost 50 episodes and you wouldn't think that would be a big deal. And so I just one night up way too late after a cold plunge, emailed you, woke up the next morning, you're like, yep, let's do it, man. And I was like, holy shit, So I just want to say thank you first and foremost for creating this space. I don't even know if I want a podcast. I kind of want to just look up and
go work out.
Yeah.
Hit the sauna.
But it was very inviting. You were very open with, let's get this thing going on. And it's putting somebody on like myself, even to get the opportunity to kind of come into your online presence as well as like your physical presence. It does mean a lot, man. And I really appreciate that. But one of the things that I did want to ask you, is, when you posted that picture the other day with the difference, from when you were 26 and looked like you had a drink or something in your hand, and I don't know where you were at mentally, but to now, I started kind of digging in, and there's been many iterations, like when you were doing these Ironman races and things like that. And like, you can see the physical transformation from that time to now. But the thing that I'm curious about, having recently sort of started this or restarted this health transformation for myself was, what was that kind of lightning bolt that struck like before? Like, what drove you to want to no longer be the guy with, sitting at the beach or whatever it was with that drink in your hand? Like, was there a light switch moment?
Yeah, so it really was a progression. There was no one defining moment. There was no, I had a DWI or, some massive life event that kind of forced me to, take life in a different direction. It was really, I just felt like I was going through the motions and I didn't feel all that great. I was, sleepy every afternoon. I was sitting a lot during that time period from 2002 to 2007, 2008. I was driving 50,000 miles a year, selling insurance, going door to door to campgrounds and marinas, eating Subway because I thought that was my healthiest option when I was on the road. I didn't have an education around eating single ingredient, animal-based foods and how much that not only affects your physical aesthetic, but your mental performance and your energy levels, your sleep. So I hired a personal trainer in my mid-20s, late 20s, 27 years old, I think is when I hired that personal trainer. And I hated it at first. I was booking 6 a.m. sessions with him before I was going into my office at the time. And they were hard workouts. They were 30 to 45 minute CrossFit type workouts before CrossFit was really on my radar as a form of working out. He had me doing complex lifts like squatting and deadlifting and thrusters and pressing movements. And then in between the sets, there was an indoor track and he would have me running around the track. So I was essentially doing CrossFit where you're lifting weights with your heart rate elevated. And after working with him for about a year, I mean, my aesthetic completely changed. I went from probably a little over 200 pounds with, a little flabby gut and no real muscle definition to 175, 180. And, you could see a six pack and you could see some definition in my arms and my legs. So that was kind of the start of my journey was hiring him. And I needed that. I needed the accountability. I needed the knowledge that I lacked, and I needed the structure. I didn't have any structure around working out. My structure was really based around making more money. I was just chasing money for the public perception of success, to buy nicer things, to have a bigger condo and nicer cars and nicer suits and pocket squares. So also with training with him, I started to recognize the feeling associated with exercise, just how mentally clear my mind was. I felt like all of these dots that I had collected over time after my workouts, like I could piece them together. I was making connections. I was connecting people. I was coming up with creative ideas, and I just felt so sharp compared to drinking and not getting good sleep. And, I can look back at it now and completely understand why that was the case. But when you're in that world of, call it eating ice cream every night and drinking on the weekends, like that's your world. You don't know what 100% feels like. I think I was operating at 65% or 70% then. So it wasn't until I started to get closer to that 100% that I recognized how much better I could perform, how much more fulfilled I was, and how much fuller my cup became from exercise. During those years, I started running again, which I had a running background. I played 3 sports in high school. I ran cross country, I ran track, and I played basketball. Basketball was my favorite sport. I played 1 year of basketball in college. I sat the bench at a D3 school, which was humbling coming from like a small school where I was the star. I got into weightlifting in college. So, it wasn't like I was just, some schlub. I did have an athletic background, but from 20 to 25, I definitely got pretty out of shape. I was only working out 3 days a week, 30-minute sessions, very vanity based, bench press and push-ups and bicep curls, never deadlifting, never squatting, never doing a lot of these functional movements that I do now. So fast forward back to, a year into the personal training, I'm looking good. I'm feeling good. I kind of stumbled into triathlon. I was playing tennis for my aerobic conditioning during that time period. So I was starting to work out twice a day. I was doing these morning personal training sessions, and then I'd play 90 minutes of tennis. So, I've gone from working out 30 days, 3 days a week to working out 2 hours a day, pretty much every day. And then a bunch of my friends in Syracuse, New York, which is where I'm from, they had these really fancy bikes that had 4 handlebars on them. And I'm like, what the hell is that? It looks so cool. Like it's the triathlon bike. And I'm like, okay, I know what a triathlon is, swim, bike, run. I'm like, what triathlon are you doing? And they told me about this half Ironman distance triathlon that was coming to Syracuse. So I asked what the distances were, and they said a 1.2 mile swim, 56 mile bike, and a half marathon. I'm like, you do that in a day?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, people do it in under 4 hours. I'm like, what? That sounds crazy. But more than anything, I was intrigued by the bikes. I thought they looked really cool. So I went out and bought a triathlon bike. So at that point, I'm kind of signing myself up to do a triathlon. So at 2009, I did my first sprint distance triathlon. I almost drowned in the swim. I had no real swimming background. I grew up on Lake Ontario, but never swimming in a pool with my head in the water, like understanding the proper stroke or breathing. I passed a bunch of people on the bike because I had pretty strong legs from doing all these CrossFit workouts, and I had started running again. So I had gotten fairly fast again. So it was, I think I finished 3rd in my age group in this small local triathlon, which was empowering. I'm like, oh, this is cool. I think I could be good at this sport. So I signed up for another sprint distance triathlon that following year. an Olympic distance triathlon, and a half Ironman. I got the bug, and I went all in on triathlon. I started doing triathlons every Wednesday night in Jamesville, New York. They had this big triathlon club with like 1,200 members, one of the biggest ones in the country. So over a 1 year period from 2009 to 2010, I really immersed myself in the sport and just was running, biking, and swimming often. I had given up tennis to focus on those disciplines, still personal training, so still getting the strength training in. And I started winning these Wednesday night triathlons, but I would always get beat in longer distance triathlons by this guy, Mike Corona. So an Olympic distance, half Ironman, he beat me, but he didn't look nearly as fit as I did. So I'm like, what the hell is he doing that I'm not doing? I'm going to all of these Wednesday night triathlons, and every single training session I'm doing, I'm giving it CrossFit type effort. Like, I want to get faster with every single one. So I'm redlined for 45 minutes, an hour. Like, I thought that's how you work out, like you just go harder and harder and eventually you'll get fitter. And he taught me an incredibly valuable lesson in endurance sports, in that you have to slow down to speed up. He taught me about the Maffetone method, which is zone 2 heart rate training. And by slowing down, you're going to be able to do more volume. I would be able to up my running miles without risking injury. I would be able to up my biking miles, and, swimming, I could keep at a high intensity. But biking and running, he's like, I want you doing all of them at under a 140 heart rate. Prior, I was doing everything at like a 165, 170, 175 heart rate,
Just
going at
flatlined.
pretty much
Damn.
max effort.
Yeah.
So it took him 2 months of telling me he was going to fire me if I didn't listen, because at first I wasn't listening. I'd follow his duration, but I wouldn't follow the heart rate scheme. And he's like, you have to slow down if you want to beat me. So, finally I slowed down, and in 2010, I was running 8:30 mile pace at a 140 heart rate. And that just felt like a walk in the park for me. I didn't feel like I was doing anything. Coming from doing everything at a 170 heart rate and running in the, 6 minute per mile pace for everything. But fast forward from 2010 to 2014, listening to him for 4 years, executing on a daily basis. If he put a workout in, I hit it to a T. I went from that 830 pace, 140 heart rate, to a 620 pace at a 129 heart rate that I could maintain for 20 plus miles. So it worked. It worked magic. I did my first Ironman in 2012 at Lake Placid. I missed qualifying for Kona by 1 spot. The guy who got the final qualifying spot in my age group passed me at mile 25. I saw his age on his leg, but I didn't know at the time that was the final spot. I gave it my all. I couldn't walk for a week after that race. I was smashed.
You posted something about that the other day, and it was like the comment was really neat, because it sounded like that drove you.
It did.
It drove you. It sounded like you focused on that the entire next year until that same race came around the following year. So, did that make you like hyper focused? Like that was, missing about one place, like it's one thing if you're blown out by 30 people, but missing about one, like that's got to be a little bit, agonizing to just.
If you want to be elite at anything, you have to have this burning desire, passion, or you're doing it for some reason. And for me, it was to prove myself that I could be world class at something, and like scratching the surface at being world class, like that really stoked my fire. So I was training hard leading up to that first Ironman, but I trained even harder leading up to that second Ironman, where I qualified for Kona, and then I went to Kona and had a horrible race. My stomach was off. It was one of those. I didn't practice what I preached. Going into the race, I did things different. Like I had way more carbs in the days leading up. I had a big pancake breakfast. I loaded up on sodium. I just did things that I wouldn't normally do because I thought Kona was an anomaly, and I had to do all these other things that I was reading about. And I should have just stuck to my game plan and what I had already done that worked for me in other Ironmans. So shitty race. I think I went 11 hours, which was my slowest Ironman. So that was my motivation to come back and do it all over again in 2014, in which I had a great race in Lake Placid, qualified, and then had a really good race in Kona. I went 9:36. And after Kona, I continued training. I contemplated whether, I wanted to try and go pro. My times were kind of back of the pack pro, and it was a lot more prestigious to be a front of the pack amateur than a back of the pack pro. And I knew that the only way to continue advancing in the sport was going to be swimming more and giving up more of my strength training, which I had already neglected a lot. I went from 180 and, looking pretty jacked to low 160s and looking like an elite triathlete. So I just wasn't willing to make those sacrifices. And I had already sacrificed so much from the standpoint of I wasn't traveling much anymore. If I did travel, I had to make sure I was near a YMCA so I could get my swim in. I had to make sure I had access to a indoor biking facility to get my bikes in, and I had to be close to running paths. Like, my life was dictated by training. So 2015, 2016, didn't compete. I had signed up for a bunch of races, but I wasn't going to the races. I would just kind of back out, and those were tough years for me. I felt like I had lost myself. I had this identity in a small upstate city of being this elite Ironman triathlete, and I didn't want to do that anymore. But, that's what everyone wanted me to do. So, I really struggled for those 2 years of switching my identity. And, as I sit here today, 7 years after that, I've found my way with just inspiring others to adopt a lot of these wellness practices that I experimented with over the years that I really feel like made me the best version of myself. And, that's the message I try to preach now is all of this stuff I'm doing today and for the last 7 or 8 years has not been for competition. It is to be the best version of myself, to have a full cup, to be able to give back. And, I've attracted a ton of opportunities into my life from just exuding that energy and that passion.
Mm-hmm. So the CrossFit thing, was that just sort of a natural progression for, when, like, after you ran that last race in Kona in 2016 and you were kind of not wanting to do that anymore, professionally or as part of your life,
mm-hmm.
When did you sort of gravitate towards the CrossFit thing that you're doing now?
Yeah. So CrossFit was always in the mix. A CrossFit gym opened right near where I lived in Syracuse in 2009 or 2010. So I trained with my personal trainer for probably 18 months, and then I switched over to that CrossFit gym. Subsequently, I ended up opening my own CrossFit gym with some business partners in Syracuse called Urban Life Athletics in 2013. So all along the triathlon years, I still was taking CrossFit classes. I wasn't training like a CrossFit athlete, which is what I do now. But, I was jumping in on workouts 3 to 4 times per week. I mean, I was working out 3-4 days a week. I was 100% or 3 to 4 times a day. I was obsessed with working out during that time period, unhealthy obsessed. Now I work out twice a day, and I would argue that what I do now is very sustainable. Back then it wasn't sustainable. I was getting injured and I wasn't doing the recovery stuff I do now, and my cortisol levels were super high and testosterone low. So I was doing myself a disservice from massively overtraining. So CrossFit all along. 2017, when I moved to Denver, is when I made this switch, the flip to prioritizing CrossFit over endurance. 2017, 18, 19, I still was running quite a bit, and I got into mountain biking. 2019, 20 is probably when I really prioritized strength training, and now pretty much every single day, my first session of the day is strength training, CrossFit training. And when I say training like a CrossFit athlete, it's very different than just taking a CrossFit class. It's 90 minutes to 2 hours of gym work with, warming up the movement patterns before getting into any kind of lifting, squatting, deadlifting, pressing, most of those movements twice a week, Olympic lifting 2 to 3 times a week, doing gymnastics and skill work, doing accessory work, which has really helped me stay injury-free.
What is accessory work?
It would be like bodybuilding type stuff,
Okay.
bent over, reverse flies, and doing band work, crossover symmetry, strict pull-ups, doing stuff that wouldn't be a CrossFit Metcon, but is going to massively strengthen the smaller muscles, tendons, and ligaments. So, like a lot of people in CrossFit, they battle various injuries because something hasn't caught up in strength to something else. So, for example, handstand walks, like my shoulders might be strong enough, but my wrists aren't strong enough. So you need to figure out how to get everything in unison. And that's one of the toughest parts about CrossFit is you're just taxing so much. It's tough to have everything in unison all of the time. So I started working on some of these smaller muscle groups to make sure they were as strong as the larger muscle groups to, support 300 pounds overhead or to support high volume handstand walking and stuff like that. So yeah, now my training looks like 90 minutes to 2 hours of CrossFit 5 days a week. And then this time of year, it's fall here in Colorado. I'm mountain biking 6-7 times a week, pretty much every single day. I love mountain biking and not really running that much. I mean, a lot of my shift in aesthetic from the Ironman years to now is because I'm lifting often and I'm not running nearly as much.
Sure.
Right now, I maybe run 10 miles a week, if that, and oftentimes it's hiking or rucking, so not even running.
Do you feel better without the running? And I ask that because like I was saying, I've kind of started this health thing, this journey for me, and I've got a long ways to go and have to continue it. But last March, I ran the Baton Memorial Death March marathon, and I was probably 235. I'm 5'9.5", right? So horribly overweight, bordering possibly obese. And I was doing my training circuit was 5 to 6 miles a day. I felt like, okay, I'd run the race before in a much lighter frame. This race blew out my knees. The last 6 miles was horrific. And it's a big, gigantic sandbar. And so it just makes it even worse on you, both mentally, you feel so defeated. And so since then, I haven't ran, but I only started this journey in July of this year. And I'm almost scared to run because after the race, I tried to run maybe a month after and it was very painful, but I was also walking around with nearly 40 pounds more on my body, on my gut and everywhere else. But I've noticed that historically speaking with me in different iterations of my life, if I was working out, whether I was highly fit and still drinking or whatever the case, I would always have like a steady running regiment. But now I'm not running at all. I'm only working out. I'm doing cold exposure, hot exposure, or heat exposure, and I'm not running. And I almost feel better in a weird way because I used to run to really get into my mind. I had something to work out, like go run 10 miles, you'll get through it. Now the sauna completely alleviates that, right? If anything needs to be worked out. So, I mean, how do you feel not running? At least as much as you used to, or even, a portion of that.
Yeah. I mean, I'll preface this by saying I love running. I mean, I get the runner's high. That's why I ran for so long, is because of that high afterwards. And, there's certainly progress associated with it when you're covering ground and you just did a 10-mile run. Like, you have this massive high from, accomplishing this difficult thing, this obstacle. I do feel better not running as often now, for sure. But I also have a lot of volume running, so that beats me up more than anything. And weight is going to make a massive difference on how much it beats you up. I mean, I've seen various studies that have shown that every pound you lose, no other things considered, like you speed up 2 seconds per mile. So if you drop 10 pounds, that's 20 seconds per mile just by dropping that weight. And just think about the impact that you're putting on, your joints with running when you're carrying more weight. So weight makes a massive, massive difference in running. I do think it pays to be strong because it's going to help prevent injuries when you're running. I was very rarely injured during my Ironman years because I was maintaining all of the strength training. And running is just so durability based. You have to check your ego. If you were a runner and then you took a break and then you get back into it, like I would start right now with like 2 to 3 mile runs. I ran 10 miles maybe 5 months ago at a wellness retreat, doing no build up to it. And I can still hang. I certainly don't feel nearly as fast as I used to, but I was wrecked afterwards from it, where, a 10-mile run during the Ironman years was do it again the next day and the day after. Like, it was no big deal. So running is very durability based. So if you aren't doing it regularly, like, check your ego and start slow and start small distances just to remind your body of, the durability you need to run high volume. Right now I'm just kind of completely out of running because it isn't a focus for me. I'm trying to get to the CrossFit Games in my age group, and my weakness is my strength still, and running massively affects my ability to lift heavy. and I need to put another 20 pounds on my back squat and my deadlift to be super competitive in my age group. So for that reason, I've kind of, running will come back at some point, but to get to the CrossFit Games, it just doesn't align with my goals right now of needing to get a little bit stronger. But typically, I keep at least 2 runs in my schedule every week, just so it's in my repertoire, and I'm not super beat up if someone asks me to go on a 6-mile run. And I mean, it's one of the easiest forms of fitness. If you're traveling a lot, it's so easy to just bring running shoes with you and go for a 6-mile run, and you get that runner's high afterwards, and you feel great for the day. So, I have this love-hate relationship with running, where when I'm doing it frequently, like, I love it.
Yeah.
But if I'm lifting heavy and doing lots of anaerobic conditioning, I feel like a linebacker when I go for a run.
Yeah. So the running stuff, like, obviously you had a coach when you were in your Ironman days and you were training. Did that feel more, community based, or kind of like this solo effort? I mean, it's obviously you have somebody in your corner.
Yeah.
But versus what you're doing now, and maybe it's 2 completely different, frames of thought, because it seems like now, like you're kind of sort of building a community, if you will. Maybe that's more of the online presence, and I don't know how it works in a CrossFit gym if you have never been to one, but I assume that it seems to be like a bit more community based than if you're doing like high endurance, like constant training where it's just solo. So am I kind of right in thinking those, like the Ironman days were more solo based versus now you're kind of building this community? Yeah,
they early on in it was community based. I was going for group runs, I was going for group rides, but as my goals changed to wanting to get to Kona, I had a very individualized plan, and very few people wanted to run at the pace and the distance that I was running, or bike the wattage that I was biking. So yeah, it was very individual during those years, in that I would often meet people to go for a run, but we'd do our own thing and we'd, fist bump at the end of it. So
Sure.
we weren't, conversing during it.
Yeah.
The sauna and the ice barrel are the biggest community building tools for me. Whenever, someone messages me on social media asking to meet up or go out for coffee or lunch, I'm like, come over to the house, let's sauna, let's hit the ice barrel, let's do 3 rounds of contrast therapy. Captive environment, your endorphins are racing. The best conversations I've ever had in my life have taken place in saunas. So that's what I really think of as my community building activity is sauna and cold exposure. There is a community building aspect to running for sure. I'm going to Running Man in a week, and they got 1,000+ people that are going to this.
Yeah.
So, I do think that there is an incredible running community, and there is the ability to build community through running. I still host, trail runs and rucks and things that bring people together, but running isn't my priority anymore. So I'm willing to do them at whatever pace someone else is doing it at. I don't need to check the box of getting, my 10-mile run in at my 135 heart rate with 3 5-minute intervals at race pace, which is what I had to do during the triathlon years to get to Kona. So it all depends like what your goals are with it. So CrossFit is community building too. I like CrossFit because like we can do a workout together, and I can do it at my weight and my intensity. You do it at your weight and your intensity, and we fist bump afterwards, and we're in the exact same setting, encouraging each other throughout. Running is a little different in that, you take a bunch of elite runners, they're probably going at their own paces and they're not talking to each other during it. Afterwards, sure, you have that, endorphin rush and you have a great conversation after, but during, I would argue it's not as community oriented or conversational as, going to a CrossFit gym or doing strength training with a bunch of people where you can talk in between the sets and stuff. But again, sauna, ice barrel, those are my favorite places to build community.
So right now I'm doing everything at my house, and oddly enough, I just talked to a really good health and fitness coach friend of mine that was on the podcast, and I wanted to jump into this thing so hard, so fast, and not give myself a single excuse. So kind of taking a little bit of what you were preaching with the sauna. Bought an at-home sauna. It's like it's in the gym, and part of that was because the gym that I was going to with the dry sauna, they closed at 7 on the weekdays and 5 on the weekends. And my life's crazy. So I'm a real estate agent by trade. My wife has her own business, and we have 2 kids that are both in activities, and so it's you never know. And sometimes the phone can ring, and it's like, I want to do this. Okay, And so I didn't want to have any excuses in my life, you know? And so part is like, all right, well, we got a gym at the house. So you can do everything to get a good solid workout at the gym. It may not be as good as if going to like a public gym or a private gym. But there's no excuses, right? It could be 9 o'clock at night. That really sucks. You know, it's like, you know, but if you miss a day, it almost feels like 10x worse than actually getting in there at 9 o'clock and getting it done. And so I've eliminated all those things. But what I'm finding is that I see the head wall coming at a certain point to where I think that it's good for people to kind of check their pond every once in a while, if you will. You know, it's like, are you the largest fish in your pond? Well, if you're the only person in your own personal garage, this is all you're doing. Like eventually I need to become part of a community to help me go past where I'm only going to be able to get to by myself. Did you kind of hit that, something like that in the past, like switching from that solo, extreme solo effort to being like, okay, well, you almost have to like humble yourself to be like, okay, I got to check my pond real quick. Am I the biggest fish in here, or is there somebody else out here that can move me to where I really want to get?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm here in Denver, Colorado now, is because my lifestyle changed so much during those Ironman years that I really, you know, outgrew, and the environment I was in didn't make it easy for me to thrive in, you know, my new activities and what fulfilled me. So, you know, moving to Colorado, where there's so many risk takers out here. There's so many incredible endurance athletes out here. The weather is beautiful. The mountains beg you to be outside all of the time. You know, I feel like I'm thriving here. And, you know, I recognize that all through the Ironman years. I had a lot of time by myself running and biking to like think through, like, is this what I want my next 10 years to be like, or am I writing a chapter in the wrong environment? And I realized I was writing this epic chapter, but the environment wasn't making it easy for me to live it to the fullest. So, you know, I feel like I am living it to the fullest out here, especially as, you know, I've gotten into content creation and, you know, helping other people build their brand. It's so nice to be in a place where it's impossible to take a bad picture or shoot a bad video. I mean, the sun's out all the time. I mean, we're looking out at the mountains right now. It's beautiful here. And there's so many amazing road trips that are in every direction that are so accessible to us, world-class places. So yeah, I was traveling a lot from 2010 to 2016 before I moved here in 2017. And I also recognized that the people I wanted to surround myself with in other cities were different than the people I was surrounding myself with in Syracuse. And I had great friends in Syracuse, and, you know, I still love them dearly, but the people in New York and LA, you know, they just had a different perspective on, you know, building $100 million company instead of a $4 million company. And their willingness to take risk was something I hadn't experienced in, you know, in a small city.
Much larger. They were much larger. More risk tolerant.
Much more risk tolerance. Yeah, you know, just like willing to try things, willing to meet new people, wanting to connect, wanting to build communities. You know, instead of, you know, upstate New York cities are very much people that were born and raised there, and there's very few new people coming in. There's very few transplants. And you go to a place like Austin, you know, Austin is just all transplants. Everyone there is looking to connect and build things together and, you know, do cool community events. So, you know, different places will allow you to thrive in different things. And for me, you know, Denver allows me to thrive in all of my outdoor activities I like to do. But I do travel to places like Austin frequently, and Santa Monica and Venice and Nashville, where, you know, they're the type of people that I really enjoy interacting with. And those cities also have a lot of wellness-based hubs. There's a lot of founders of CPG brands, which is a lot of who I work with now, wellness brands.
What is
in
the
those cities.
CPG brand? I've seen you post about that. What is that exactly?
Consumer packaged goods.
Okay.
So, you know, a product like, you know, this, you know, direct to consumer are a lot of these where they're selling a good online to, you know, an end consumer. And I specifically work with companies like that in the wellness space. That's where, you know, I feel I have the most knowledge. I've tried the most products, and, you know, my audience is most interested in, you know, the latest and greatest in that space.
Yeah. I mean, some of the ones that you let me ask this real quick. Do you try everything before you represent it?
100%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So everything you're promoting, you believe in and you like actively use on a daily.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily
you see it here in all of our shelves and our fridge. So yeah, I like it. I mean, I never thought what I'm doing now would be a profession or a job. I mean, I fell into this world of being influential and, helping sell things for the brands I work with. But I mean, it started out as I was just posting my training in Ironman and how I was balancing entrepreneurship with Ironman and my cool new bike I just got and how much food I was eating. There was no intention behind it from 2010 until 2015. And then, 2016, Oakley reached out to me and invited me to spectate the Ironman World Championships and promote their new sunglasses they were coming out with. And that was kind of my aha moment I had 10,000 followers at the time. And I realized that, brands were going to start shifting their marketing dollars towards audiences on social media.
Yeah.
So that was when I started taking it seriously. I bought a nice camera. I started learning photography, meaning like the creativity behind photography, depth of field and lighting, all of that. You can have a nice camera, but you're not going to take a good picture unless you understand a lot of the creative aspects of it. And then, when everything became more video-based, I started to understand how to shoot good videos. And now, honestly, a lot goes into every post of how can I add value for my audience? How can I add value for the brands I work with? How can I attract a new audience? How can I satisfy Instagram's algorithm? Like I kind of have to think through all of these different things. And there's a lot that goes into a high-performing photo or video, taking all of those different things into account. So yeah, I fell into it. So I wanted to make sure that it didn't feel like a job. I still feel like I'm more just documenting what I'm doing rather than, trying to create things throughout the day. And, I'm also on a lot of calls throughout the week with brands, connecting people. And I really enjoy that because my background is entrepreneurship. Like I opened a gym and restaurants and my insurance business and a software company. Like that is my background is entrepreneurship. So I understand what it takes to build brands and to attract customers and how to find product market fit. So I've really enjoyed helping other brands with all of those things. So, for 3 hours a day, I'm on calls with brands, just like chatting through strategy of how to find your customer and how to do a better job marketing, how to build an ambassador program, how to get people yelling from the rooftops about your product. I invest in a lot of these companies I work with. I help them raise money. So, I really have this hat on of I want to help you build your brand. I want to provide massive ROI beyond just this number next to my name and, me posting on social media.
Yeah, you kind of hit something on the head, and it's funny because it's really easy, I think, for a lot of people on Instagram, and I am so horrible at it. I'm learning every single day and failing miserably and trying to crawl back from something that was just took 10 hours to put together that just fell on its face. But there's a lot of like rapid, quick judgment when somebody doesn't understand the amount of work that goes into even a bad post. Right? Like if it's, you're trying to put something out there, it takes an insane amount of time and honestly a little bit of strategy. And like I said, there's, I'm nowhere as versed at it as some are, but it does take time, and it takes a charismatic value that I think that you have when obviously when self-promoting that, whether it's with a product or it's something that you were personally doing. So the fact that, not only do you use the products, but you invest in some of these companies and you're trying to build that brand holistically, right? And not just get a paycheck. Because that's the thing is there's so many questions that I would love to ask you about that side of it, because I think that there's a concept that it's easy to not only make the content, but to grow your channel, to get sponsors. I just had I was a guest on another person's podcast the other day, and he was like grilling me, and it was great. I didn't have to worry about the cameras and have to do anything. I was like, yeah, this is awesome. But he was like, yeah, you guys are monetized. And I was like, nowhere close to it. He's like, what? You got like almost 50 episodes. I'm like, yeah, man. But like, have you looked at what it takes to monetize a YouTube channel? It takes a lot. It takes consistency. It takes, and a lot of that, better than half the time you're learning from failures and like you're trying to get better at each episode. So to hear that, it's not just I'm just going to shoot this and just put a product into the camera. It's like there's strategy behind the things that you're doing, whether people like it or not. It's kind of eye opening, because sometimes even when you're doing something like silly and goofy, it's like, all right, I got to think this out. Like, what is this ridiculous? I'm just playing around, but it's got to have kind of almost a script to it, you know, because it's got to make sense to somebody who doesn't know me and doesn't know my humor that could be across the country. And so it's pretty interesting that to hear that there's a lot of strategy behind what you're doing, and it's not just kind of off the cuff.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's years and years of sets and reps to get to a place where, you know, now it's much easier, and I know what brands I want to work with. I know how to work with them. I know what my pitch is. I know what value I can bring, and I understand what types of content to create to captivate, you know, my audience, to attract a new audience, and to also, you know, amplify awareness for the brands. But I mean, it took 6 years to get to a place where I understood all of those different components. And I still have to, you know, change things up here and there because something I was doing is no longer working. You know, for example, when Reels came out, you know, all of a sudden, like feed posts weren't doing all that well. Pictures, like, you got to learn video, and you have to understand how to make a captive reel. So yeah, all of that stuff is sets and reps, and eventually you get to a point where you do figure out product market fit, and only then does it start to become easy in that you know what to do, but there's still a shitload of work that goes into producing it. I mean, every single day, you know, I'm on 3 hours of calls, and I'm documenting literally the entire day. You know, generally, if you didn't have all of these camera setups, I would be recording this so I could take pieces out of it for various things. And also, when I'm not working, I'm working. And what I mean by that is most of my best ideas come when I'm out on my 90-minute mountain bike ride. You know, I'll literally send voice notes to myself of 5 ideas I came up with while I'm out there rucking or mountain biking. And, you know, God bless Sarah, my girlfriend, that she understands this. Like, I need to exercise because that fuels my creativity. So I really consider that fueling my craft. Like, I have to get my morning workout in so that I am very sharp and creative on my 2 to 3 hours of calls immediately after the workout. And then I go off on my mountain bike ride in the afternoon so that I have another 2 hours of being super sharp. And I'm also focused from being very present in that skill-based activity with risk associated with it. So I can focus on 2 hours on a podcast, or I can focus for 2 hours on creating content for a brand. So, you know, even when I'm not working and it looks like it's fun, it's a lot of times to fuel that mental clarity and that creativity.
Yeah. You ever just set it down?
I wind down at night for sure. I mean, I love my life. I love what I get to do every single day. I really feel like, you know, and I'm so grateful that I've found my perfect day and I've been able to monetize it. So I don't crave vacations. I don't feel burned out. I mean, certainly my head is through the ceiling a lot of times, like I'm taking on more than I can handle, but you know, I figure out ways to, you know, either, to make it easier to do it, or I delegate, automate, or eliminate things. And I've continuously done that through the years of, you know, running various businesses at the same time. So no, I don't need to like take a break from my life, but I do wind down at night. I mean, 5 p.m. is when I generally start my contrast therapy routine and just have people over here, new people and close friends. And then, you know, we'll grill meat for whoever stays afterwards. And then 8 o'clock, I'm winding down. I'm usually out here on this patio watching YouTube for 45 minutes or reading a book, just trying to learn something. I avoid highly stimulating environments late at night. I'm not, you know, doing emails or anything late at night. Like, I want to start winding down so I can get really good sleep. And then the mornings are kind of slow for me too. It's just kind of planning out the day for the first hour and a half.
What is your regimen as far as when do you wake up?
Wake up without an alarm, generally at 6. Lately, I've been waking up early. I think I'm in this chapter right now where I have taken on a lot, and if I were to do blood work right now, I'm sure my cortisol levels would be higher than usual. You know, just a phase of life where I got really excited about all these different things, and it's kind of all hitting at once with all these wellness retreats coming up and setting up this experience house in Austin and taking on more brand deals and hiring some people. So I've been waking up at like 4 or 4:30 the last 2 weeks, but generally I'm waking up at 6 a.m. with no alarm. Some water in the morning, make some coffee, and then 6:30, planning out the day and starting to work until 8 or 8:30, and then hit my first gym session at 8:30 to 10:30. And then again, winding down 8:15, kind of depends on sunrise, sunset, what time of year it is. And in bed by 9, usually sleeping by 9:15, 9:30.
That's really good. That is my biggest detriment to my health is sleeping. I've always struggled with it. I saw, the product that you promote, the Beam product. I do want to try some of that because
great. I'll give you some.
But I did want to ask you a question specifically about that because, I tried. And I do want to preface this with, I was taking the Alpha Brain day and night packets, but I was also not working out. I was running. It was before the marathon. I was significantly overweight. I wasn't sleeping well. So there's all these like other things, right? And those packs, some of the things I felt like obviously like synapses were firing like a lot faster. But for me, I've always felt that there was this, I don't really know how else to like call it, but with melatonin, it's almost like a hangover or like a groggy, like, I don't know, this like carryover period after a night. And the thing that I was reading with the Beam product is they have a light and almost like a light beam and then like a full blown. And I did read that it does have a little bit of melatonin, but for some reason, melatonin always like, I don't know if it was just previous where everything was just off, and that was why the melatonin was maybe having it, or I had alcohol in my system and the melatonin wasn't jiving with that. Could have been a number of things, but that's something that I cannot deal with. Like when I wake up, I'm 100% go. My brain is similar to yours where it's rapid fire. And unfortunately, if I wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, I can't go back to sleep. It's like I'm up and ready. But I do want to try something because I think that the sleep, everything that I've heard, people like you say, everything that I've read is it's imperative to just normal operation, but also too for physical health. And it's something that I can see where it's like my circadian rhythm. For years, I worked oil and gas, right? I was an electrician and I was up at 4:30 because I had to be for a job. And I was asleep early because I was tired, physically tired. So, but now I'm a real estate agent and I don't take a phone call before 8 o'clock in the morning. I will not. And one, because I'm dealing with my children, I want to drop them off and I want to be there for them until that time frame. And so that's kind of like crept over. Like I'll stay up late, far later than I want to. Realistically, it's just I can't shut the brain off. And that's affecting everything downstream. My circadian rhythm is awful. And it's like, I want to, it's not necessarily that I want to take something to be able to sleep better. I just want to be able to sleep better and more sound. I kind of took some advice from you. And oddly enough, like, have been sleeping with the sleep mask. And it's funny because it's my daughter's and it's pink, but you know what? She's let me borrow it and it's great. But, I haven't done the earplugs just yet. I'm a little bit nervous about that. I'm kind of always on edge with, making sure kids are good. And, but I mean, that does a ton, just blocking out the light. It lets me sleep, quite a bit more sound, at least for the first few hours of sleep. But yeah, that's a massive thing is like that circadian rhythm. And I know mine's off and I'm doing all these other things right now to like really get up to speed. But that's one that's like just lingering. That's like, I've got to correct that. Yeah.
I mean, sleep is so structure based in that, right now, like I'm not on a very good sleep structure for me. Like generally I'm out at 9 or 9:15 and up at 6. I'm getting my 8+ hours of sleep. But, the last 2 weeks I had just like 3 nights where my mind was racing. I'm up at 4 in the morning and got up and just wanted to start working again. And that forced me into this new routine of 4 a.m. is the new wake up time, but I don't want it to be. So, I mean, you really have to focus on getting to bed a little earlier if you are waking up that early. And just like focusing on really winding down at night so that your mind is shut off. Because for me, it's more about like my mind is racing. I have too much on my plate. My cortisol levels are too high. And that's why I'm waking up. It's not because I got disrupted or something else. It's just I have too much on my plate. My cortisol levels are too high.
What is cortisol? Just for those of the listeners.
Yeah, it's a stress hormone. It's,
gotcha.
When cortisol is high, that generally it's leaving you in this fight or flight state. And oftentimes high cortisol is also going to have an effect on lowering your testosterone. So that effect is going to have a massive effect on how well you sleep or getting to sleep, staying asleep. So yeah, I mean, the whole key is like getting 3 to 4 days of really good sleep, and then you get back on a good sleep routine.
Yeah.
So winding down, like I don't do a lot of work at night. I will get up early in the morning and I'll start hammering away, but I am really good at avoiding highly stimulating environments late at night, not having conflict late at night, not answering a bunch of emails and being overwhelmed with how much more I still have to do. Like I really shut it down after 5 p.m. after that sauna session. And, don't really think about it until I wake up the next day of, the never ending to-do list. So that's the key. And then with melatonin, like it's going to affect people differently. I've taken melatonin since 2009, 2010, the Ironman years where I was having trouble sleeping again, cortisol levels, managing multiple businesses and training 5 hours a day. So it helped me. I certainly know the experience of waking up groggy. I would be lying if I said the first 5 or 10 minutes I am, a little bit groggy, but within 10 minutes that wears off.
Yeah.
With the Beam Dream specifically. And their lower dose one, I think, is only maybe 2.5 milligrams of melatonin. So it's not a, massive 6 milligram dose like a lot of the over the counter pills are that you would get. And there's other ingredients in there too that are calming. Other things you can try though, if you don't want to do melatonin, magnesium. Bioptimizers, they have this magnesium supplement that has 7 forms of magnesium in it. That's a great one. L-theanine, GABA, those are things that'll calm your minds. But also keep in mind, if you are, consuming caffeine, shut that off by 11 a.m., 12 p.m. I just do caffeine in the morning. I shut it off after 11 a.m. And then like on an Alpha Brain I took for years during Ironman, and it fueled my training sessions. It fueled mental clarity. But there's also, you're going to have some downsides to it too, in that it allows you to take on more than you probably should. So
how so?
It just like you are very action oriented when you take something like on it Alpha Brain. You're super on. Like let's talk for 3 hours, then go for a run, and then like you're grinding your teeth and like you're fired up about life and you're getting shit done. And there's a consequence to that of cortisol. You're going to be raising your cortisol levels. So I'm careful with the nootropics that I take now. I'll take them when I know I'm willing to sacrifice the down from it or the spike in cortisol for the performance I'm going to get from the nootropic. So for example, High Rocks race, Leadville 100 mountain bike race, CrossFit games, things like that. I'll take a nootropic because I know it's going to fuel massive performance and massive focus. But, I'm not taking them on a regular basis just because for me, I know that there's going to be this, a small downside to it of it's allowing me to do more than I probably should, which is going to raise my cortisol levels and ultimately affect my sleep. And, you get into that pattern too long. That's when all of a sudden you're burned out and, you dug yourself into a hole.
Yeah. Oddly enough, my wife let me sleep the other day, and I hate to even say this publicly, but I did go to bed at around like midnight, right? So it's not as bad, but she let me sleep till like 9:45 in the morning, and I woke up and I was so groggy, like it's almost like I had overslept. Yeah. But then that middle of that day, I was like, I feel amazing. Yeah. And God, I almost wonder if you have just a steady sleeping regimen, if you just feel that's your normal. Like I felt rested in the middle of the day, and it's just like it's like so many things, and my situation is, you hit the nail on the head with the caffeine. It's like I am so bad with it. Like I have to have a cup of coffee in the morning. It's more of just like this, I don't know. It's a thing, I love having a cup of coffee with my wife, and like we sit there and we do our thing, and but then it's like, okay, well, are you overly worked out, and you're going to have something, whether it's a cup of coffee or some type of caffeine at noon. Then some days it's like, okay, well now we're drained and we got to still keep going. We're going to be here till 9 o'clock. So we're going to take something at 3. And that's where I make a massive failure. It's just like, and kind of like you go in the opposite way of what your coach was saying during the Ironman years, right? Like, it's there, you've read about it, you've heard about it, but, that is one thing I really, 2 things, caffeine and the sleep. I have to get that under control if I'm going to really change my life and actually live truly healthy. I think those are the 2 largest things, because all the other stuff, like right now I'm doing the caveman diet, or 99% caveman. I feel amazing. Workouts there, sauna, cold plunge, like I'm doing all these things right. my brain is functional, but the things that are still just kind of lingering from this like past life of mine are the caffeine and, and that's it. Like I don't, really take anything else other than like a multivitamin. So it's the caffeine, which is negatively affecting the sleep, and the sleep is carrying over to the next day. So.
Yeah. Hey, look, we all have our vices. You know, I have my vices too. We all have our vices. So yeah, I mean, it's just figuring out what is a little better vice that you can move to.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe some earplugs and a better mask. I don't know.
and you're going to have sprints where, sure, I mean, you're going to have to sacrifice quality of sleep. Like I get it with kids. Like, yeah, there's just no way around it. Those first 2 years or however long, yeah, you're going to have to sacrifice sleep for this incredible new joy that's brought into your life. So, it's ebbs and flows, and it's just being conscious of, okay, I've dug myself too deep. Like now I got to focus on the other side of, let's get back into a good deep sleep routine.
Yeah, absolutely. For somebody who's doing, let's just kind of say that they're starting off like in the whether you call it like social media influencing or, whatever the classification of it is that they're doing. If they're looking at, representing brands versus branding themselves. Cause I mean, and this is obviously outsider perspective, but I mean, you Eric, you do have your brand, right? Like obviously, but not in the sense of like, I'm not wearing a Eric Hinman hat, right? You take on and represent and build other brands by utilizing or kind of propping them up on your network or your brand. And I've talked recently to some folks that are, kind of juggling that scenario of like, okay, do I brand myself or do I work with another brand? And it's kind of like, I'm thinking about that on the drive up here. I'm like, well, Eric's kind of he is doing that. Like he is a brand, but not in the sense of like, you don't have a Nike swoosh, And so what is your thoughts on that? Or what advice can you give to someone that's like pondering that? Do I work on focusing and building my brand, as me, and then the actual like legitimized or product brands will come to me. Are they, what's your advice on that?
Yeah. I mean, my advice is give way more than you take. And eventually like the opportunities will come to you. So I think it's about just focusing on providing massive ROI, and then, opportunity and monetary form is going to come. That's what I did. I mean, I never thought of social media as being this place that I would monetize.
Sure.
It was literally just initially sharing my life and then recognizing the opportunity to impact others and sharing things that I thought would help impact others. And then, brands started reaching out. And I also, early on, I reached out to brands too. I said, hey, I love your sunglasses. Here's some shots I took while I was in Hawaii. Feel free to use them. And I did that with enough brands where a few were like, hey, let's chat about doing something together.
Sure.
So I think Alex Hermosi just put something out fairly recently about putting out, like 60 or 90 pieces of value before asking for anything back. So it's like give, and give a ton before you ever put your hand out to take anything.
Sure.
And, go narrow and deep. That's one of the biggest things I tell anyone starting a personal brand, a business brand, anything is narrow and deep. Be known for something. Be the person that has all of the knowledge about exercise for cats, like something like super narrow and deep.
Yeah.
Where you are known as the
guy.
cat exercise guru. That's how you're going to build a following the fastest now, is if you're known for something. And then, add value and evoke emotion, like evoking emotion, like humor, inspiration, conflict certainly works. I don't go that approach, but, if you can generate interest, if you can generate people sharing your content, saving your content, messaging you, messaging others, that content is going to perform really well. So honestly, like the first second or two of any reel, the initial first impression on a picture, like it has to tell the story to captivate someone's interest, because there's just so much content out there nowadays. You got to figure out how to compete with all of that out there. So thinking through like, what is that immediate thing that is going to captivate someone's interest, saying it in a way that it hasn't already been said before, in a unique way to me, sharing my story that no one else has. I mean, that's a lot of what I think through with my content. And as you start working with brands, other brands are going to take notice. I mean,
Sure.
now I've worked with hundreds of brands. So word spreads,
Yeah.
they're like, hey, we worked with Eric. He was awesome. You should work with Eric. So you're going to get name dropped a lot. And then second, brands are watching social media too, to see like who they think is doing it well.
Yeah.
And if they see 10,000, creating community and having tons of ambassadors, they're going to want to work with whoever 10,000 is working with. So, be selective in who you work with, and other brands are taking notice of who you're working with and will want to work with you if they see you providing value for the brand you're working with.
Nice. Yeah. Sorry, that was more of a personal, not personal for me, but an interesting conversation I had sort of off record with a gentleman about the brand. And he has built some of the most notorious brands that we all know, like, and love, right? From a graphic design standpoint. But branding himself is difficult.
Sure.
And that's weird. But he told me something the other day, and it was like a light switch. He was like, you learn from day one when you're a graphic designer that you never sign your work.
Mm-hmm.
You're always the guy in the background who built the brand, and sometimes you get to ride those coattails, and you kind of get the next job, and you get the next this. But now he's sort of stepped away, and he's written a book, and he's doing some things, and so he's having to kind of flip the switch on his mindset of like, God, everything I've done my whole career for 35 years has been, staying in the background, and making those brands go in the direction that they want to go. And so just hearing you kind of talk about it, because I think in a weird way, publicly, he's sort of kind of having to start at ground zero, but has like seen and been a part of other things that have just gone through the atmosphere, And so,
I mean, you can apply that to his personal brand. I think having a personal brand is so advantageous because it can create so many personal and business opportunities.
Well, it's just different too. I mean, I love the way that you're doing it. Like, and I make a joke. I'm not wearing an Eric Hinman hat, right? But I mean, you are a brand yourself, and like even with like this podcast, it's weird. I've had so many people tell me, you're not doing this, or you're not branding this, or and I'm just bad at it. But the thing that I want to do with it, and this is different. Like, well, we're sitting on your back porch, right? I'm out of my element. But I wanted to come and meet you and interview you. But like, I'll record these episodes, go back and mix them, edit them, listen to them, and then obviously try and learn for the next episode. So ask something a little bit different, or I interact different with the guest. And, everybody's like, not everybody, but a lot of people have told me recently, like, hey man, if you look at your Instagram page, it's just the podcast. And I'm like, that's very true. But I was like, I'm passionate about it. I'm so flippin' passionate that it's like, that's what I want people to honestly like know me from, is the podcast kind of thing. And they're like, well, like they can't just only know who you are sitting at your desk that they're familiar with on YouTube. Like, and so like as of 3 weeks ago, I started, I don't know, putting myself out there. And I almost feel a little bit fraudulent with it. I feel like kind of cheesy or cringy. But it's one of those things. It's like I had somebody reach out to me the other day from a post that I was kind of micro celebrating some weight. I lost 26 pounds in 60 days. And granted, I was gigantic and I should never have been there. So it was a little bit easier, but I busted my ass. And this is, the morning after I just had this conversation with this gentleman, and I put it out there and I hit send on Instagram, and I just felt so cringy, like, but this person reached out to me and she was like, hey, what did you do? So I kind of told her, hey, this is what I'm doing. I was like, you know what? I'll send you an email. I'll tell you every single thing I'm doing, and I'll send you links. And it was like, all right, that one, nobody's ever called me about the podcast, but this one person called me about this random post that I put up about my tiny little win that I was sort of celebrating, but also trying to, show people you can do this. Like, I'm just a Joe Schmo, but like if you focus and kind of work towards something, you can auto correct your life if you've let it go so far down that road. And that felt so different to me than everything that I do with the podcast. I still love the podcast, and I love the podcast to be organic and feel right. And sometimes it gets so emotional that, I've broke down and literally had tears with a guest that said something that they didn't want to say. We had planned to talk about it, but when they walked through the door of the podcast studio, they were like, I can't do it. And I was like, absolutely. Hey, this is a trust room. We're not going to talk about it. And then midway through the show, they said something and they started tearing up and I could see that. And it's like, I didn't want to pull on the heartstrings. I wanted them to go there and they went there and there was such a pause. And like, I mean, the room just went, it was like a vacuum, so quiet. And we both just broke, so it's like, that's what the podcast is for me. But like this, even though I get something so visceral from doing this podcast at times, I've never had anybody reach out to me directly for that. So it's like, if I put myself out there though, in a way that I'm vulnerable and it's me on my cell phone, it had a direct impact on one person and they called me. And I don't know whether that email fell on deaf ears or not, but it was a thesis. Here's everything I'm doing. And here's how you can potentially help yourself out too. It's interesting that like when a person sees another person doing something that they feel is real, it's like they gravitate towards that.
For sure.
I
mean, the only way to fast track success is to find someone who's gotten where you want to go.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's so much of social media is getting inspiration from people who've gotten where you want to go. I mean, I'll have people send me every single meal they're eating saying that they're completely following my diet and routine. And I'm like, it's cool. I'm like, you don't have to send me every photo of every single thing you eat and every supplement you take. I believe you. That's cool. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great place to learn from others. And that's where I like to learn. I mean, I don't watch the news. I feel like most of the news is negative or conflict based. And, I get that attracts eyeballs and that's going to attract advertising dollars. Like I understand this business, but I want to learn from others. I really like self-experimenters. That's always who I've consumed content from. That's always who I've surrounded myself with, is people who've done things that I want to do and they self-experimented and they bootstrapped and, they were hungry for what they wanted and they got it. And that's who I want to surround myself with and learn from. Yeah.
And the people that inspire you. Yeah. That's one of the things too on this journey. And I did a solo cast the other day because I had a bunch of guests cancel and, it was weird. I was talking kind of, you're monologuing, but you're having a conversation in your head. There just happens to be a camera there and it's awkward.
Yeah.
But it brings out some things in myself sometimes that I wouldn't otherwise say if I'm looking in the mirror, right? It's just, I'm talking and, the title of the episode was Cutting Ties and it was weird. I released the episode and I came back to it and it kind of, I said something in that episode. I was like, you don't need 1,000 friends. You need 5 bad motherfuckers. And I was paraphrasing Joey Diaz, right? A comedian. And I didn't mean it as in like the sense of like, you need to cut everybody who's been there in your life out. But what I meant is that I was trying to say that right now in this fashion and even moving forward, like I want to surround myself with people that I want to be around because time is so, it is so, it's so fleeting and we have so little of it that we don't actually realize. It's like if we're wasting that time with somebody who is negative or is like physically taking that time from you, or you're focusing all your energy on something that doesn't benefit you. And that's kind of what I meant by that. It was like, I don't want to be around people who I don't want to be around. I want to be inspired by people. I want to be around people that are jumping through the roof at an idea that everybody else around them thinks is absolutely insane and crazy, but they're just crazy enough. It's like, you know what? He's going to pull this off. Like he's going to actually do this or she's going to do this. And I had a couple of people that are really close friends like, hey man, are we good? I'm like, we're totally good. I was like, I was making a joke at a reference from a comedian, but there actually was some weight behind it because I think that if people get the opportunity, they should surround themselves with people that inspire them and aren't always like-minded. It's good to be around like-minded, but not in an echo chamber. It's like you need those people that are going to push you in the right ways and not steal your time. Like positive confirmations are great, but if it's like, if you've got somebody that's constantly like, if they need you to call upon them so that way that they can have affirmation, right? It's like, no, like you should be good by yourself. Like you could leave the flock and be fine. And so, one of the things I did want to ask you is like, I struggled with that after that episode. And you have gone through these huge journeys, body transformations, Ironman to CrossFit to doing this thing, building these gigantic communities. And you seem to have surrounded yourselves with great like-minded people to also people that are constantly lifting you up, not necessarily propping you up, but that are pulling you up from inspiration, or you're inspired by them, or you're driven. And I mean, have you had to kind of cut to move forward, if that makes sense, like in your life, like with people, with even loved ones, to make sure that you were fulfilled, that you were satisfied?
For sure. I mean, everything in life is like practicing and experiencing. So I feel like I've practiced interactions for a very long time. So I understand, for me, what types of interactions leave me feeling fulfilled and energized, and what types of interactions leave me feeling drained. And, my mind was wandering. I was wishing I was somewhere else or with someone else and having a different conversation. So, I think in your 20s, that's a great time to practice interactions, to just say yes to lots of meetings and meet lots of people and throw lots of parties and just like put yourself out there all the time. And you'll start to understand the types of interactions that you want to say yes to and the types that you want to say no to. So being mindful is the key to that. And I had a period of time during the Ironman years where I started to write out a VIP list. Like, these are the 100 people that I want to interact with on a regular basis because they add so much value to my life. I add value to their life. It's a two-way street. And I feel so energized and inspired and excited and stoked after interacting with them. So encourage people to make that VIP list, and then just like write out all of the people, the environments, the activities that you're not completely present for. You're doodling, your mind's wandering, you're wishing, you're doing something else. And then do the same for all of those moments where you're completely present. Mountain biking, I love it, I'm completely present. CrossFit, I love it, I'm completely present. Conversations like this, completely present, in flow state. I wrote out all of those interactions and all of those environments and all of those people where I just felt really fulfilled and I was completely in the moment. And, over time, again, you'll kind of build out this perfect day around presence of what you want to be doing, where you feel like you're getting value and giving value and you're progressing. I mean, progression for me is huge. I like to build my life around incremental steps every single day of, in my mind, progressing forward in various things.
Oh man. Yeah, that's a good one. Eric, I honestly, I can't, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you so much for inviting me to your place and, just shooting the shit and hanging out. It's been a really good one. And, yeah, man, I genuinely am inspired by a lot of things that you're doing. I can't thank you enough. And I know that for whatever reason, I just happened to stumble upon your page from some friends and saw the sauna. The sauna and the cold plunge have honestly changed my perspective on a lot of things in life. They've allowed me, especially with the sauna, to work through a lot of my mental struggles. And, I do think that I still suffer from, maybe some mental health issues that I have to work on daily. Right. I'm not perfect by any means, but those things, by seeing some of the things that you did and talked about them, truly inspired me to get my own sauna and start to use that on a daily basis, regardless of what's happening in life. And I just, whatever inspires you to do this, just keep doing it, because there are people like me that just happen to come across your page from a recommendation of somebody that it does have a profound impact on, man. And I genuinely appreciate what you're doing. And thank you again for the opportunity to just come hang out on the porch and chit chat.
Heck yeah.
So,
thank you. Yeah, let's hit the sauna now.
all right, let's do it.
Cheers, brother.
Have you ever felt
Are you listening? Damn.